Hey, Kay Vine, back down on the streets of Kelowna, in the very guts of the city, just seeing how our journey here in this town that's just changing so rapidly, how it fleshes out. We follow Jesus, we share our faith, our lives, and our stuff, and we just invite whoever will come just to journey with us. And we see this being fleshed out through our commitment to walking with each other into spiritual formation, discovering community together, and engaging in good works that not only benefit our community as K-Vine, but result in social impact through compassion and justice. Of course, that ripples out far beyond this city and even into the international scope of things. But at our heart is this posture of generosity. You hear us say quite a bit about this posture of open hands. We just hold everything loosely, knowing that if God asked for it all today, He'd provide tomorrow. This is just a journey of being generous. Who do we see and what do we have? And so we want to start getting a rhythm back into the just the regular understanding of who we are at K-Vine. And the first Sunday of every month, we want to introduce something that we're calling Benevolence Sunday. I know that doesn't sound super creative or innovative. It's a term that churches have used for actually millennium. So if you've got a better name than benevolence, let us know. But we want to be just a little more intentional, especially because we're in this virtual reality right now. When we would gather down at the Boys and Girls Club, it was just a very natural part of who we were to give alms to the poor, to step into a generous space. Many times people just throw cash into the basket, up to hundreds of dollars, with no tax receipt needed or anything. We were able just to give in immediate response to needs that were in the city and within our community. We feel like we've lost some of that during this time of being in this virtual reality. Some of you might not even be aware that this really is key and central to who we are at K-Vine. So again, first Sunday of every month, which is today, we want to step into this place of generosity, benevolence. Dictionary definition of benevolence is the quality of being kind, of being well-meaning, it says in the dictionary. It's a quality, and it's something we definitely really want to cultivate. We're in this series now that we're going to be exploring Jesus' teachings on the Sermon on the Mount, and this is laced all through what Jesus says. But specifically in Matthew chapter 6, verse 1 to 4, Jesus says this: "Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. So when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets, to be honored by others. Truly, I tell you, they've received their reward in full. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. Then your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you." We'll be unpacking this in some weeks from now a little bit more in depth, but just for the purpose of this particular Sunday, again, which we're calling Benevolence Sunday, the real key to the text here, I think what Jesus is really getting at, he's saying, let your private life match your public life. And whatever you're doing, it's not to be the center of attention. It's not to draw attention to yourself. It's for God to see, and it's to open our hands in generosity for the sake of others. This has been such a difficult thing to learn, even in this COVID time. It's so hard not to become self-focused, particularly in aspects of isolation that we're facing. And so we want to, again, intentionally step forward into the space of generosity. But we really want this to just be natural to us, to come out of the natural instincts, the natural calling, and our natural understanding of who Jesus is and what His kingdom is about. We're not raising funds. This isn't because to ease our consciences. This isn't to just do good because we're supposed to. We want this to truly just become a regular part of the rhythms that we engage in. It's interesting in this Matthew 6 text as well that Jesus does talk about this thing of giving alms. The Greek here translates into the term alms, A-L-M-S. You might have heard this term before. It's been used in church liturgy and church expression for many, many generations. But it comes out of this text, the understanding of alms. Again, that quality of kindness that actually extends itself in generous giving of stuff, of time, of resource, and yes, of money. Again, this is not for show. It's not for show. We step into this space because it's where we thrive in Jesus. It actually is at the core and the center of the gospel of the kingdom. If the poor are missing in community and they're not being engaged with as we live out our lives in society and culture, something goes tilted in the gospel. Very, very quickly, it becomes about ourselves. It becomes about our prosperity. It becomes about our blessing. It becomes very inward focused, especially in times of fear and challenge like we're facing right now in COVID. It can drive us into spaces of isolation and exclusion and, dare I even say, like religious ghettos. This is not the heart of Jesus. And at the very front end of this vibrant, beautiful, generous space of the kingdom is amongst the poor and the broken. Galatians 2:10, when Paul and Barnabas are being sent out as the very first church planters in the whole entire history of the church, the only requirement they're given by the apostles at that time is to not forget the poor. Then Paul says, that's the very thing I wanted to do. James, the half-brother of Jesus, in the chronological order of the New Testament, wrote the very first book in the New Testament, was written before the Gospels were actually recorded by Matthew and Mark and Luke. And James is saying that the poor are at the center of community. It says they have the kingdom. And James is a really great pastor because he qualifies it in the text. He says the poor in the eyes of the world, because he knows everyone he's sitting there and they hear the word poor and they go, well, yeah, the rich need Jesus too, brother. Or, yeah, who's really poor, whatever. It says the poor in the eyes of the world. In our Canadian context, who's below the line of poverty? That's who Jesus is talking about. That's who Jesus is talking about. And so we're to engage there, of course, all throughout the book of Acts. And then there's this beautiful text in 2 Corinthians chapter 8, where Paul talks about this posture of generosity that we're calling for today. He says it's to be a regular part of the community. He says if you're righteous, and in both the Greek and the Hebrew, the term for righteousness and justice are completely interchangeable. There's no holiness, there's no righteousness without engaging in justice, in practical ways of attacking and dealing with systemic issues of oppression, of poverty, of those kinds of things. It's congruent with what it means to be a righteous people. And 2 Corinthians 8, it says, it's the righteous that know how to open-handedly scatter their gifts to the poor. Then it says the end game of community is this, that those who have much should not have too much, and those who have little should not have too little. I don't know what it would be like to sit in a major meeting of developers and stuff and city planners that are looking at Kelowna right now and say, could we ask the question, when is much too much and when is little too little? So we look at things that are happening around the globe right now. Could we just dare to even ask the question, when is much too much and when is little too little? Michael Crosby, Franciscan who lives in community with other friars in the downtown Milwaukee area, and he serves the urban poor and the homeless and marginalized, says this, it's not so much a matter of charity when he's speaking about this text that we're looking at in Matthew that Jesus is speaking about. It's not so much a matter of charity as an essential demand of justice. So, there's all kinds of things we could talk about here. We want to get this into our rhythms. So the central question is this. Maybe this is just a good place to start as over the next months and years we keep wrestling with this and talking about what it means to engage in generosity, to engage in caring for the needy, to engage in alms and generosity. Who do you see and what do you have? Who do you see and what do you have? Key in the teachings of Jesus is this thing of sight. Open our eyes. Open our eyes, Lord. Who do we see and then what do we have? Another way to say it is, what is the currency that we're carrying? Jesus said something really remarkable in Matthew 10 when he sends out the disciples. to do the works of the kingdom. He says this, leave your money belt at home. That doesn't mean that financial giving will never be part of this. In fact, that's what we're doing on this Sunday, and we feel we've got good reason to, both from the biblical text and our life experience, as well as knowing Jesus. But he says, never ever base it on money. This isn't about money. This isn't about funding. This isn't about projects. This isn't about an outreach. This is, again, about the posture of our hearts. Who do you see and what do you have? What's the currency you're carrying? Sometimes it's only prayer. Sometimes it is financial resource. Sometimes it's something to share. And so we want to just keep asking this question and revisit on an intentional monthly rhythm this whole thing of generosity. Who do you see and what do you have? So there's ways that we want to step in. There's tax receiptable giving. C.S. Lewis said this, the only things we can keep are the things we freely give to God. We want to share our resources, and we want this to be at the guts of everything that we do. Sharing is an entirely different posture than giving. Giving is important, but the lifestyle we want to cultivate is that of sharing, where we're not holding on to anything for ourselves. It's not the haves giving to the have-nots. It's about living life together. I think I said this to you all before, but I've been so impacted by something John Wimber said years ago. It's all about just one beggar helping another beggar find out where there's bread. So it's sharing resources. God gives us things to share, Mother Teresa says. God doesn't give us things to hold. God gives us things to share. God doesn't give us things to hold. So again, this thing of open hands. And then we really want to explore, experiment, challenge each other to step into the place of anonymous alms. Just giving for no other reason than to just release our resources. No tax receipt needed, nothing, no payback, no kickback in any way, but to just generously give. St. Francis of Assisi said this, alms are an inheritance and a justice which is due to the poor, which Jesus has levied upon us. I think that's beautiful. I think it's all right. This isn't out of obligation again, but if we look deep into the eyes and the heart of Jesus, this is something we should be cultivating. So we'll be talking a little bit more about this throughout the morning. We're going to give a bit of an international focus today, and we'll be explaining all that. But let's step into this space. Let's open our hands, particularly with our resource, what we can share, what we can give in this time, and see what the Holy Spirit would have us do.